Welcome to Just Sneak, a place where movies and TV shows open up in a whole new way. Every story has something surprising. Every frame hides details that are easy to miss, and every new release is a chance to dive into a world of captivating tales. If you enjoy watching films more attentively than most people, you're in the right place. Get comfortable. There's a lot of interesting stuff ahead. Today we're taking a look at Daughter of Darkness, the forgotten Gothic masterpiece from 1948. If you enjoy what we do, support the channel, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new videos. Thank you to everyone who's already with us. Your support helps the channel grow and makes the content even better. Introduction. Imagine a film where a young woman's mere presence causes grown men to lose their minds and women to recoil in primal fear, where the line between victim and predator blurs into invisibility, and the Irish countryside transforms into a landscape straight out of a dark fairy tale. This is Daughter of Darkness, a 1948 British Gothic horror film directed by the enormously talented yet curiously forgotten Lance Comfort, starring Siobhán McKenna in her first major film role. This picture has lurked in the shadows of cinematic history for far too long. Based on Max Cadow's 1938 play They Walk Alone, the film represents something genuinely rare. A British attempt at psychological horror that owes as much to German expressionism as it does to the Gothic literary tradition. Made on a substantial budget of £200,000 sterling, a considerable sum for a British production in the late 1940s, Daughter of Darkness arrived in UK cinemas on January 23, 1948. Critic Geoff Mayer calls it one of the most startling British films of the 1940s, a mixture of Gothic and horror that stands completely apart from the restrained, realistic tradition that dominated British filmmaking at the time. Context of creation. From stage to screen. In 1938, writer Max Cadow penned a play called They Walk Alone, a psychological drama about a young Irish woman whose very presence seems to unleash destruction. A decade later, producer Victor Hanbury decided to bring this unsettling story to the cinema screen, securing a distribution deal with Paramount British Pictures and a substantial budget of £200,000 sterling. Cato himself adapted his theatrical vision for cinema, which proved crucial to the film's success. The director? The producers found their ideal director in Lance Comfort, who had already demonstrated his affinity for dark melodrama in films like Hatter's Castle 1942 and Bedelia 1946. Comfort was respected for his technical competence, and more importantly, his personal vision aligned perfectly with the material. As the BFI Screen Online biography notes, Comfort's films steer clear of social messages. They are more concerned with the individual than with society, presenting a picture of mankind in which evil is not simply an occasional aberration, but an integral part. Casting the impossible role. The role of Emmy Baudine required an actress who could project innocence and menace in equal measure. The producers found their Emmy in Siobhán McKenna, an Irish stage actress making only her second film appearance. The Radio Times would later describe her as one of the most compelling of Irish stage actresses. The supporting cast was equally impressive. Anne Crawford played Best Talent, the suspicious daughter who senses something wrong with Emmy. Maxwell Reid portrayed Dan, the brutish boxer whose pursuit of Emmy sets tragedy in motion. Barry Morse and Honor Blackman appear in small roles early in their careers. Production. Production took place in 1947, with 3 weeks of location shooting in Cornwall and interior work at Riverside Studios in London. The £200,000 sterling budget allowed for considerable ambition. The carnival sequences were staged on a scale that one reviewer compared favorite scenes in Hitchcock's Strangers on a train. The material itself posed challenges. How do you depict violence and sexuality in a way that will pass British censors in 1948? Comfort navigated these challenges with considerable skill, implying violence rather than showing it explicitly, suggesting sexuality through charged glances and loaded dialogue. The Laurence Olivier anecdote. When the film was completed, McKenna's work made such an impression that Hollywood offered her a studio contract, but she sought counsel from Laurence Olivier, who advised her to stay in theater, recognizing that her gifts were too large to be squandered in the Hollywood factory system. McKenna heeded this advice, turning down the contract to build a legendary stage career. This means Daughter of Darkness stands as a precious permanent record of a great stage actress at the peak of her powers. Lance Comfort, a director in the shadows. Lance Comfort was born in Harrow, London, in 1908. His entry into the film industry came early, around 1926, when he began working as an animator and cameraman on medical films. This background in technical crafts shaped his entire approach to filmmaking. His second feature, Hatter's Castle, 1942, gave him exactly the kind of material he responded to: psychological melodrama with genuinely dark undercurrent. Through the 1940s, Comfort directed a series of quality dramas that established his reputation, including Bedelia, 1946, and Temptation Harbor, 1947. What made Comfort's approach distinctive? First, his visual style drew on German expressionism, deep shadows creating spaces of menace and uncertainty. Second, his handling of ambiguity refused to explain away his character's darkness. In Daughter of Darkness, we never learn definitively what Emmy is, and that refusal is central to the film's power. Third, his work with actors was remarkable. McKenna's performance is the clearest evidence of this gift. If Daughter of Darkness represented a creative peak, the film that followed, Portrait of Claire, 1950, nearly destroyed his career. It was a commercial disaster that lost so much money that Comfort's career never fully recovered. The 1950s and 1960s saw him directing B-movies and television episodes, though films like 8 O'Clock Walk, 1954, and Tomorrow at 10, 1962, demonstrate his continuing skill. During his lifetime, Comfort received scant critical attention, but reassessment has begun. Film historians Steve Chibnall and Brian McFarlane praise his gifts in the confident exercise of melodramatic impulses in the interests of illuminating character and relationship. The story, Innocence and Terror, Opening the Darkness, Daughter of Darkness, begins in a small Irish town called Ballyconnan. Mass has ended, but the congregation doesn't leave peacefully. The women cluster together, demanding that the priest take action against a young woman who remains inside the church, kneeling in prayer. Their hatred is irrational, visceral, almost hysterical. They can't articulate what Emmy has done wrong, only that she's dangerous, that men can't resist her. Inside, Emmy plays the organ, a mournful lament that expresses her isolation and sorrow. The scene carries echoes of Frankenstein, combining religious imagery, sexual tension, and psychological disturbance into a uniquely unsettling mood. The fair comes to town. When a fair arrives, Emmy catches the attention of Dan, a handsome young boxer. He pursues her with determination, and for the first time we see Emmy happy, relaxed, almost childlike in her pleasure. But when Dan leads her to a quiet spot outside the fairground with clear intentions and Emmy resists, he turns nasty. The next shot shows Emmy running through the fair in terror, followed by Dan, whose face has been horribly wounded by her fingernail. Exiled to England, Father Corcoran gives in to pressure. Emmy must leave. He arranges for her to work for a farming family in Yorkshire. The Tallant family seems kind, and the pastoral English countryside seems a world away from the claustrophobic intensity of Ballyconnan. But Emmy's effect on men follows her. The farmhands find themselves drawn to her, and Saul Trevithick becomes increasingly obsessed. Bess, the elder daughter, begins to watch Emmy with growing suspicion. The return of Dan. The fair returns, the same fair, with the same boxer. Dan has not forgotten what Emmy did to him. His face bears a loathsome scar, and he wants revenge. He corners Emmy in an isolated barn. What follows is the film's most intense sequence, a chase through expressionist shadows and harsh angles. Then silence. Later, Emmy is found wandering home, dazed. The next morning, Dan is discovered dead. The investigation. Dan's death transforms the film into something closer to a murder mystery. Bess's suspicions crystallize into certainty. She digs into Emmy's past, determined to uncover the truth. But the truth is maddeningly elusive. We never see Emmy kill anyone, never learn definitively what she is or why men die around her. The screenplay maintains its ambiguity to the very end. Themes and ideas. The film explores several rich themes. Female sexuality as threat. Emmy's effect on men terrifies the women around her because she represents a power they can't control. The irrationality of mob hatred. The persecution of Emmy reveals how easily communities turn against those who are different. The ambiguity of evil. The film refuses to explain Emmy's nature, forcing us to accept uncertainty. And psychological disturbance. A film as to expression. What makes the story unique? The uniqueness lies in its combination of elements that rarely appear together. A horror film that refuses to explain its horror, a psychological thriller that maintains genuine ambiguity, a gothic melodrama grounded in social observation, and a film about a monster that makes us sympathize with the monster. As TV Guide notes, it's strong stuff for 1948. Hidden depths, facts and discoveries, the cat-people connection, the similarities to Jacques Tourneur's Cat People, 1942, are striking. Both films center on young women with a terrifying secret related to sexuality, using shadow and suggestion rather than explicit depiction. The advertising for Daughter of Darkness played up these elements with taglines like the urge to kiss was an urge to kill, and no man could kiss her, and live. But Daughter of Darkness develops the premise in distinctly different directions, adding social dimensions of class, community, and religion that Cat People largely ignores. The German Expressionist heritage. The visual style draws deeply on German Expressionism. The use of deep shadows, distorted angles, and subjective imagery creates an atmosphere of unease. The academic journal Miranda traces how Comfort uses backlighting, frames within frames, and mirror images to express psychological state. The casting surprises. The shopkeeper early in the film is played by Bartlett Mullins, credited as Dennis O'D, Siobhán McKenna's real-life husband. So the woman playing Emmy is watching her actual husband on screen. Barry Morris would later achieve fame in The Fugitive. Anna Blackman would become iconic as Pussy Galore in Goldfinger. The tragic story of Anne Crawford. Anne Crawford, who plays Bess with such stylish intensity, died of leukemia in 1956 at just 36 years old. Her performance stands as a reminder of what was lost. Critical reception then and now. When released in January 1948, critical reaction was mixed. Some found it genuinely disturbing and powerful. Others were put off by its darkness and ambiguity. Arthur Vesilo, in Sight and Sound, rejected the violence, the inversion of moral values, and the exploration of the least respectable corners of the psyche. The film was not a financial success and represented a setback to Comfort's career. But critical opinion has shifted. Today, scholars recognize it as one of the most startling British films of the 1940s, dated by the sexuality. The Locarno Film Festival has screened it in retrospective programs, and online reviews are passionate and appreciative. Expert analysis, The Anatomy of a Cult Classic. Direction, Lance Comfort's direction represents the peak of his achievement. His handling of atmosphere creates a world both real and dreamlike. His management of ambiguity maintains tension perfectly. His visual storytelling, working with cinematographer Stanley Pavey, creates images that carry meaning beyond surface content. Cinematography. Stanley Pavey's work in black and white creates images of remarkable richness. The deep shadows of the Irish sequences give way to the bright sunlight of Yorkshire, but even in brightness, darkness lurks. The church sequences achieve Gothic grandeur. The barn becomes pure terror through lighting and camera placement. Music. Clifton Parker's score establishes a tone of unease from the opening credits, highly strung, febrile, suggesting psychological states stretched to breaking point. The organ music Emmy plays becomes a motif for her inner life. McKenna's performance is remarkable for her physical presence, her vocal control, and her emotional range. Emmy runs from childlike innocence to terrifying darkness, and McKenna makes every step convincing. As one reviewer notes cleverly, we never know whether Emily understands her own power or whether the antipathy of women towards her are are a horrible mystery. Strengths and weaknesses. Strengths. Atmosphere that few British films of its era achieved. Ambiguity that gives the film enduring power. McKenna's tour de force performance. Visual style that creates meaning through light and shadow. Thematic depth exploring sexuality, fear of the other, and community prejudice. Weaknesses. Some viewers find the second half less compelling than the extraordinary opening. The ambiguity frustrates those who want clear answers. Supporting characters beyond Emmy and Bess receive relatively little development. Why it became cult. The film rewards repeat viewing. Its ambiguities reveal new dimensions each time. It offers something genuinely rare, a British horror film that's psychologically sophisticated, visually ambitious, and thematically rich. It connects to larger traditions while maintaining its own identity. And McKenna's central performance haunts the memory, demanding to be revisited. Influence on British cinema. While not widely seen in its time, the film demonstrates that British cinema was capable of psychological horror long before Hammer established its dominance. It looks forward to the psychological thrillers of the 1960s and 1970s, films like Repulsion and Don't Look Now, that explore disturbed female psychology with visual sophistication. Conclusion? Why watch Daughter of Darkness in 2024? First, because it's a genuinely good film, atmospheric, disturbing, beautifully made. Second, because it offers something different from the horror films we usually celebrate. A film of atmosphere and suggestion, of psychological complexity and moral ambiguity. Third, because it showcases a great performance. Siobhán McKenna's Emmy is one of the most complex portrayals in horror cinema. Fourth, because it illuminates a forgotten corner of cinema history, bringing a lost masterpiece back into the light. What place does it occupy in cinema history? It's not one of the undisputed classics, but it belongs in the second tier alongside other cult treasures. It represents the peak of Lance Comfort's career, captures Siobhán McKenna at her cinematic best, and demonstrates that British cinema could produce psychological horror of real sophistication. 76 years after its release, this forgotten masterpiece waits to be discovered. Seek it out. Watch it in the dark. Let its shadows envelop you. Let its ambiguities work on your mind. And then ask yourself, what was she? The question has no answer, and that's exactly the point. If you enjoy what we do, support the channel, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new videos. Thank you to everyone who's already with us. Your support helps the channel grow and makes the content even better.